Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you specific takeaway, all that way your journey can be at least a little bit easier. And so this is the final vlog, if you will, of 2022, the final transmission, so to speak, of this year, obviously, right? I'll pick back up in 2023. But looking back on it, this has been quite a year. It's, in many ways, it's been one of my best years, and in many ways, it's been one of my hardest years. And what's even kind of more difficult is the idea that, during the holidays, the idea that we can slow down, that we can reflect upon, and stuff like that, is something that excites me, right? And this year in particular, that hasn't been happening, right? It seems the industry of capital continues to beat on, so to speak, and in a strange way. And I know I'm not the only one to have felt this. A lot of people have been literally just kind of working right up until the holiday, and then now we're sort of back in the midst of it, which in many ways is tragic, right? It's quite unfortunate. In a way, it almost feels like, all these people made New Year's resolutions at the start of 2022 and then are realizing that, oh, wow, I didn't do any of it. So now, hey, I need to do this and blah, blah, and, now all of a sudden it's your job to get it done, so to speak. And yeah, that saddens me. And, when I kind of think about it, yeah, I can bring you down, sort of thing. And there's definitely been tough times in that way, because, I would like to honor all the tough moments. I mean, financially, it has been a hard year for me and a lot of other people. The money that was there is now, thanks to inflation, I use that word ironically, is lessened, things of that nature. And to many in part, the idea of you got to manage your money better type of thing. And it's well, yeah, again, I know I'm very blessed, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But, sometimes, for people who are really struggling, it's how do you manage money that you don't, that's literally just going out the door for groceries, gas, and just living, right? That's why in LA in particular, there's such a big homeless problem, is because just the cost of rent is astronomical, right? According to financial experts, you should be spending 30% of your budget on housing. Most people that I know are spending 50%, if not more. So, yeah, there's a lot going on there, and as in part a storyteller that tries to observe the world and reflect that in my art, you take on that empathy of the world, and it pains you, right? And yet, in an odd way, I can look at that and be grateful because, whether it's Ukraine, Iran, abortion rights, and so forth, I look at that and I'm at least, yeah, I am better off, right? So I can, in comparing myself to those circumstances, I can be okay, well, there's plenty for me to be grateful for. And in doing so, as hard of a path that it may be to walk at times, to utilize what I can, for the greater good, right? And I've talked about this in many episodes, actually, and it continues to be a theme of everything. I think we look at heroism and enacting change towards the world as this grand act, when in reality it's just everyday, simple, small things. Now, that's not sexy and inviting because, of course, we don't get the glory for it and the fame and the fortune, but that's not what true activism is really all about. And, as far as a path forward, it's kind of like an end to complacency. As Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in the world. It's funny, whenever I went to therapy, and I used to worry that doing so would, in essence, justify negative traits for me somehow. Like, that, whatever the case may be, take anything, it would just be like, oh, well, that's self-care, right? And I've talked about it, it's kind of now finally come to fruition, where I've talked about the bastardization of self-care in many respects has become this idea of, self-centeredness and so forth. But when you speak of true enlightenment and what the real work is, you won't do horrible, negative things, because when you reach that enlightenment, it's love, right? It really is. I mean, it might sound cheesy and whatever, and you might tune out and, call this like spiritual woo-ha, whatever. But, consciousness and life is really love. We are born into this world so pure, and we pick up so much that most of therapy is really just shedding that and getting back to our essence of who we used to be when we were born. And then, of course, the useful stuff that, along the way, like language, keep. But the rest of it, the jealousy, the anger, the hate, and so forth, that's all BS. If you're doing therapy that, in a way, like, you feel that it is justifying within you, then you're doing the wrong form of therapy. And not that I've experienced, but I have wondered about it, because, as I said, my observations of just the self-help movement, both in terms of commercializing it, and now it becoming like a multi-billion-dollar industry, and the amount of self-help books, and in essence, like, you need this outside source. Like, in many ways, I mean, listen, we all need the help to see and guide us. But in a sense, we've also bastardized like that there's this incessant need for more and more and more and more and more and more. When in reality, like, most of these things that I've observed, they're very universal and simplistic. And what it really comes down to is just doing the work, like, quite literally. But part of the bastardization is this idea of like, we'll teach you the shortcut, right? Here's the shortcut to enlightenment, and so forth. That doesn't exist, right? It's no different than activism, where true activism is not about the fame or the glory. It's about the impact, however small. And, heading into the new year, I do rejoice because of the good people that I continue to meet along the way, as hard as it is. And it can be very hard, I don't know, I joke with my friends all the time how we, like, as a society, globally, we could live in a utopia. Everyone could be fed, everyone could have fun, there could be no wars and things like that, and we could solve many, many problems. We could live in this utopia, and yet actively, every day, somehow we choose not to. But as long as there are good people in the world, things will elevate, right? And it's a struggle. It's it seems like modern society, the whole point of why I even got into the saying this was because, I think in many ways, just modern living tends to just beat us down. I know a lot of people who feel very isolated. As I said, finances are tougher and tougher. Many people have multiple jobs and are stressed and overworked and, working right up until the holiday and then right after and so forth, sometimes even during the holiday. And as I said, and it's one of those things, whether I look to Ukraine or Iran or other problems in the world, it could be worse. And so I do feel lucky in that sense, but it also doesn't change the idea that doesn't make it right here for us either. That there's a better way through this. And that's been, in many ways, weighing down on me. I think about that a lot. Partly because, as I said, I am a storyteller, and this is the stuff of life. When you can get at the truth, that's what makes your work resonate. And that's why, in many ways, as artists, we create stuff to process things. And then vice versa, people who see our art, it provides them, whether it be a roadmap or just the idea that they're seen and so forth. And that's what creates the connection. That's why we love art in whatever form it may be. Music, poetry, paintings, statues perhaps, ceramics, even good food, right? Movies, books, TV shows, all that stuff. So yeah, just kind of been thinking about that. One thing that I did want to read that I saw comes from, this was a post on Greenpeace. And then I randomly came upon it, but it really resonated, and I thought it was worth sharing. Quote, "Bicycle is the slow death of the planet." A banker made The Economist think this when they said, "A cyclist is a disaster for the country's economy. They don't buy cars, and they don't borrow money. They don't pay insurance policies. They don't buy fuel. They don't pay to have the car serviced, and no repairs needed. They don't use paid parking, don't cause any major accidents, no need for multi-lane highways. They are not getting obese. Healthy people are not necessary or useful to the economy. They are not buying the medicine. They don't go to the hospitals or doctors. They add nothing to the country's GDP, which stands for gross domestic product. On the contrary, each new McDonald's store creates at least 30 jobs. Actually, 10 cardiologists, 10 dentists, 10 dietitians and nutritionists, obviously, as well as the people who work in the store itself. Choose wisely. A bike or a McDonald's. It's something to think about. Emmerich Cilia. And then P.S. Walking is even worse. Pedestrians don't even buy a bicycle. And that resonated with me, when I talk about being the change you wish to see. It's not like I can, for me, escape the necessity of a car here in LA. But biking to the grocery store and, places that I can, has helped. It's both, exercise is both for physical health, but for mental health. So, yeah, I just thought I'd share that because, it speaks to the idea that I've been talking about, how society, in a way, pushes us into a certain default thinking where we're not even really conscious of, we're just doing it and becoming this autonomous entity moving about in life. And I know perhaps this isn't as about art as it is just kind of philosophizing. But that's why I call myself the 360 creative coach, because I don't, without the deep, meaningful stuff, I don't think you get to meaningful art that lasts. And part of my vlogs is the idea of working through some of this, and seeing what sticks, what doesn't, and getting that feedback a little bit through the comments and so forth. It was interesting. I was listening to A Bit of Optimism, which is a podcast by Simon Sinek, and he had Brene Brown and Adam Grant, two great thinkers, and they were talking about where do ideas come from. And they had like a very engaging, long conversation, so much so that they split the podcast up into two parts. Well, one of the things that they were saying is creative people have mastered sucking on the first try, but then relenting and continuing to perfect it over time. And in fact, Brene Brown has this idea of presenting the shit draft with pride. But she also made a distinction, like it can't just be like nothing, right? The difference for her when you present a shit draft is you have to be excited about it. And there has to be opportunity for growth where the people that you share it with can poke holes at it and improve upon the idea. And then, through that collaboration, the idea takes shape and becomes so indiscernible of whose idea is what, because it's all blended together. And that's why I realize I love filmmaking, because it is that. When I look at a Bogota trip, there are plenty of times where I get the credit for it, even from my own people. And I'm like, guys, part of it might seem like this thing that, I don't know, might be a little bit disingenuous, but like, no, we did it. But I truly do mean it. And I hope they realize it in that sense, because, what each of the actors brought to the characters. And I mean, without them, literally there would be no life within the film, right? There'd be no one to play those parts. And then, of course, the people behind the scenes, how it looks visually in terms of its color, and both also the framing and just the logistics that help make it happen, and how it sounds and so forth, right? Like all that stuff works in tandem, and it was in service of a greater idea. And it all started with, where I do give myself credit for is I was okay with just going for it and failing if I had to. But, I wrote the first draft and it sucked. And then I kept perfecting it and revising it, but I brought forth one that I was, very proud of. And kind of similarly now, I'm writing an outline for my new project, and I was so excited to share the outline that I'd created. It was like 14 pages to the team, and we had like a 2-hour session of really poking holes at it. And, I always knew that was going to be part of the process, but, in some sense, it never feels great to like be like, oh, this thing you were so excited for, wow, there's a lot of work left to be done. But in hindsight, yeah, it's a beautiful act. And, now I'm almost finished with it and going to bring it back to the team. And, hopefully they see the improvements. I know they will. And I'm excited about it. And I think they'll be excited as well about all those things. And yet we'll continue to poke holes at it and be like, okay, what can be improved, And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's what you want. But it comes from that cultivation of friendships and just people around you. And that's why I'm harping on the first aspect that I talked about, that seemingly is just about life and blah, blah, blah. Because it's really about recognizing the good parts of your life. I think we give a lot of weight to the negative, and myself, yeah, it's tough right now. I wish I had the downtime to process certain things. In particular, one thing that I didn't talk about was, I said goodbye to another pet of mine. I had Sparky and Chloe, and Sparky in 2020, in December, I had to say goodbye to. now, cut to 2 years later, I did the best I could with Chloe, and just, was meant to be. Now, that could be upsetting in many ways, but I also know that it was a miracle for her to even get to this point. Because I remember last year, before I shot my second movie, we were doing weekly acupunctures because she had, some stuff with her spine and nerves and things like that. And I was getting to a point, I was like, it was painful, and I was starting to accept of like, okay, this might just be her life, and I just got to give her out the highest quality of life under these conditions. And then as if nothing had happened, she was back to her normal self, running around, happy as can be. And that went on for over a year and a half, almost. But the bell tolls for us all, and it's always funny, Steve Letter's a rabbi, he talks about, those of us left on this earth, we're the ones grieving, the person or whoever that has passed, they're in a more beautiful place, Or if you don't believe in that kind of stuff, then their life is over, and that's it. Like, the pain is gone. But, still, and overall, when it happened, I took the day and really processed it. And then that was kind of it, overall. Because why would she was someone who always enjoyed life. And I like to believe, that her and Sparky are reunited. They were the best of friends, and they're playing and so forth. And so why would I be upset about that and the pain that she felt in this earth? She no longer carries that burden. And the memories I have, I will keep them and cherish them. But as they say, all love stories end in tragedy. At some point, whether it's breakup, someone moves on, someone passes away in this case, right? That's just the fact of life. And as Byron Katie says, those who argue against reality suffer. And, I bring that up because, it'd just be nice to kind of, think back on the memories. Like, as artists, we just need downtime. And as people in general, right, we just need some downtime. Otherwise, we get burnt out. And, luckily I'm not burnt out, but, in the words of the Merovingian from The Matrix Reloaded, I have survived your predecessors, and I will survive you. So, as difficult time, like as much as there is for me to have to do in these moments, I know what I'm capable of, and, the only path is through, and then, kind of reconfiguring after that. But yeah, it doesn't make me sad that, that this is sort of my state of the world and the state of the world for a lot of people. But that's why, we have to be reminded of what we're fighting for, the greater good, right? One of the aspects that Brene Brown, Adam Grant, and Simon Sinek were talking about on the A Bit of Optimism podcast was this idea that great leaders are really just actually great followers. First of all, every leader, if they need followers for them, but the leaders really see themselves as followers of something much bigger than themselves. And, for me, call it art, call it trying to help humanity, call it, trying to leave the earth a better place than I found it, whatever you want, all this ties into it, trying to make someone's day brighter in whatever ways that I can. That's what I'm following. That's what I'm pursuing. And that's what makes it okay. And that's what allows me to see the magic. the moments, even in the dark times. Something interesting, kind of switching gears a little bit. The World Cup final, whether you watched or not, is irrelevant because I'll kind of explain it, was one of the best games of my life and for many, many people. And even people that had never seen a soccer game, they tuned into it and were enthralled, right? But part of that magic was it happened in the moment, right? Sports, you can't really DVR. You can't really just watch the highlights, because watching the highlights of that doesn't show the true magic. The magic of that final was that for 70 plus minutes, almost 80 minutes, France looked like garbage. And they were down 2-0, and it looked like it was written in stone. Argentina were going to win, done and dusted, see you later. And then something happens, right? And Mbappe gets one goal. You're like, oh, okay, a consolation goal. We've seen this from Argentina where they've let their foot off the gas pedal. They have to have learned their lesson. They're gonna whatever they got to do, they'll squeeze it out for the last one. They won't suffer another goal. And what happens? Within 2 minutes, Mbappe scores another goal. It's tied 2-2. It goes into overtime. Messi scores. It's now 3-2 with just a few minutes left, and that's going to be it. Except it's not, because then Mbappe scores another one. And then you could have France score a fourth goal to almost win it, except for the goalie gets this incredible save. Boom, the ball goes the complete opposite way, just like that. And Argentina almost scores on France, and they almost win. And, neither team takes it in overtime, so they go into penalty kicks where, tragically, France ends up losing in that sense. But, just the back and forth of it all, I was texting with friends and, who both watch soccer and people who don't. It was like we were all seemingly on life support of just watching this thing because of how thrilling it was. But the magic was that, as I said, that cumulative 70 minutes of nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden that spark and it went. Because without that 80-ish minutes, it's not as meaningful, right? I mean, it could have been, but that was the magic. You thought it was over until it wasn't. That's what made, if you're really familiar with soccer, the Champions League run of Real Madrid this past season, they looked like they were always on the brink of being out. Against Paris Saint-Germain, within a 15-minute span, they got 3 goals, knocked out PSG, on to the next. Okay, well, who's next? Chelsea. Okay, they did good in the first game against Chelsea. Then at their home, they were really getting rattled. But then they turned it on. Boom, eliminated Chelsea. See you later. Okay, semifinals, the big test. Man City, right? The projected winner for many, many seasons always, but especially this season. This was going to be their year. The first game is very cagey, but Man City comes out on top. Then in this, the next game, they're at Madrid. Man City scores. They're up by 2 goals. Okay. Literally in the 90th minute, it was 99% chance of winning for Man City and 1% chance for Real Madrid. Rodrigo gets a goal. Rodrigo from Real Madrid. Okay. Again, just like with Mbappe, you're thinking a consolation goal, right? For Real Madrid and with Mbappe for France. And within pretty much, I forget, maybe 2 minutes or whatever, definitely a quick amount of time, Rodrigo scores another one, ties it up, sends it to overtime. Real Madrid wins against Man City in overtime. Wow. Okay. Historic run. Now they're in the final, and they beat Liverpool 1-0 with basically one shot on target. So the one shot they have, it goes into the back of the net. Meanwhile, Liverpool was shooting every minute onto their Real Madrid goal. Just couldn't get anything past them, right? And it's magical. And the lesson that I'm trying to extract from this is the idea that be open to it, right? Whatever your soccer is, whatever your passions in life, your art, your form of art and stuff like that, like there's beauty all around you in spite of the darkness. Us being miserable helps no one. Doesn't help your friends, doesn't help the people in Ukraine, Iran, or whatever. We have to persevere. We can be empathetic, of course. But the idea that you too must suffer, that doesn't benefit them. So, I guess that's my message. That's why I always choose to, no matter what, find the light, And I hope you do too. In my own meandering way, I hope that this has sparked something within you. Because I know it's hard out there. It is. Especially for everybody. I was just going to say especially for artists, but for everybody. And we should recognize that in ourselves and in all of us. And just have a little bit of grace and humility as we move through this world. And that's what I'd like for 2023. And I hope that resonates with you. Thanks so much. I appreciate you. I hope to see you next time.